Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, Tom Grummett, Roger Stern, Butch Guice, Louise Simonson, and John Bogdanov return to the death of Superman with a series of stories chronicling Superman's deadly fight with the monstrous Doomsday. Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, Roger Stern, and Louise Simonson returned to the event they helped create all the way back in 1993 with a series of really cool stories set around the big battle between Superman and Doomsday, exploring what some of the things John Henry Irons, the Kents, and Guardian were up to behind the scenes of the issues leading up and during the fight. I thoroughly enjoyed how devoted it was to the canon of the event, with certain characters appearing in places they would have been back in those older issues and just kind of filling in the gaps between their appearances in a way. And it also expands on the stories a bit more, like John Henry's story with a little bit more of how he was a bit more of a Superman before he became Steel and how he helped people out in the wake of Superman and Doomsday's battle. Dan Jurgens also writes a completely new story set on the in-universe anniversary of Superman's death, creating a fun little adventure that sees John Kent learn about the death of his father and have it done in a way that also helps new readers understand who and what Doomsday is, why he was fighting with Superman, and Superman's sacrifice. Dan also adhered to his own canon, not just with the death of Superman, but also the stuff he wrote during DC's Rebirth era, with Doomsday making a return during his tenure on Action Comics in those books. Dan Jurgens, Tom Grummett, Butch Guice, and John Bogdanov provide the artwork for the special, and again, like the writers, all of these people were part of the initial Superman event back in the 90s, so they gave the appropriate 90s era feel to the book, with big looking characters and their muscles, big action, and really fun paneling, especially with Dan and John, who are the key artists on the death of Superman, especially the Superman issue 75 issue where the battle ended with both of them dead. That was Dan Jurgens all the way, and it just looks fantastic, and I love the story he did where he made it sort of like an updated version of that battle a little bit, and his just artwork was just brilliant. I love the way he drew the Superman in that, where he had the raised S on the suit and it sort of had like a kind of steel look to it. It looked fantastic. The Death of Superman 30th Anniversary Special was a wonderful new addition to the Death of Superman event, filled with some great stories that expand the already established canon really well and make it really accessible for new readers. I'm going to give this issue a 10 out of 10. The Death of Superman 30th Anniversary Special heads to the past where a man named Clayton undergoes a horrific transformation as his boss calls him, telling him he's fired if he doesn't show up for work. At the new Troy Public School, Miss Waltz introduces Mitch Anderson, who is there to talk about Doomsday since he was there in town when he came. The kids have all seen the documentary on the villain as Mitch points out his black armband honoring Superman. John Kent doesn't understand why he's honoring Superman, so Mitch explains it's because the hero sacrificed himself to save him, his mother, and his sister, and many others. The kids all talk about their favourite heroes, and Mitch says that Guy Gardner was his favourite hero, but then he learned better from Superman when he paid the ultimate price. John doesn't understand, so Mitch reveals that Superman died. Some of the kids don't think that's right since they saw him on the news recently, so Mitch tells them that Superman is alive now, but back then he died in his fight to Doomsday. Some of the kids know about it, but John doesn't, as across town, Superman tries to help some construction workers move some debris. He learns that some monster was rampaging through the town, and that's why they are clearing the rubble. Superman asks where it went, but the man doesn't know since the mayor wants them to clear up the site by morning, and his best heavy machine operator has gone missing. Jimmy Olsen arrives, telling Superman to check out the video he got from a security camera that shows a Doomsday-like creature is the one responsible for the destruction. Superman doesn't want to assume that it's the monster yet, but knows some questions need answering. Elsewhere, John asks his mother, as a journalist, the truth should be ideal for her, and Lois knows it is, so John wants to know why his parents are keeping secrets about Superman's fight with Doomsday from her and how his father died. Lois had hoped that he would be older before this came up, and John knows that's why his mother was so worried when Doomsday showed up in the city recently. Lois tells him that this isn't something that they enjoy talking about since it's considered the worst day of her life. She tells him about how Doomsday is unlike any villain Superman has encountered since he really tested Superman physically thanks to his rage without reason. Lois knows that he was a hurricane of death and destruction, recounting how Doomsday broke out of his containment deep below below the earth and destroy the Justice League like they were nothing before Superman took him on alone. Superman meanwhile goes over the possibility of Doomsday coming back when suddenly the creature attacks him, swinging him around by his cape and smashing him into the ground. Lois continues to tell John about Doomsday and how Superman's fight went halfway across the country with the Beast before landing at the doorstep of the Daily Planet. Lois knows that she wasn't worried since Superman never lost a battle until that day, and she never had appreciated the constant pressure Clark was under until then, since if he doesn't win, people die. John never thought about it like that, as Lois says that fighting Doomsday isn't the only thing Clark was doing at the time, as he was helping get those people out of the way of the battle as well. John asks why Doomsday wanted to kill everything, so Lois reveals Doomsday's origins in prehistoric Krypton and how a cruel scientist killed and cloned him over and over to make sure he would evolve into the ultimate killing machine, which caused him to hate all life, especially Kryptonians. He was finally imprisoned and at some point landed on Earth, where he was buried deep underground. Lois says he came back to life when he sensed Superman's presence, leading to an explosion of violence and chaos across Metropolis. She talks about how Superman was their soldier who paid the ultimate price when he went to war, and his torn cape blowing in the breeze is a symbol of sacrifice and death that people still use to this day. She assures John that it has a happy ending, however, as Clark came back and everyone still remembers that day, and they remember that Superman fought with honor. John asks how his father came back, as Lois overhears people talking about Superman fighting a monster nearby, so her and John race off to the battle. At the scene, they find the police investigating a giant hole in the ground as Clark appears, telling his family to come with him since he's worried the creature who attacked him is Doomsday. John thinks that he'll be looking for him as well, surprising Clark, who is told that John knows today is the anniversary of the death of Superman. John asks how his father came back to life, so Clark tells him it was the regeneration matrix from Krypton that helped him, but it only worked one time. Clark assures his son that he is going to find out what is happening as Perry and Jimmy turn up saying that Doomsday is loose. Jimmy knows that he's got proof as Doomsday appears, but this time sporting 4 arms, as he calls for the Kryptonian's death. Lois thinks that this could be another version of the creature as Superman arrives to smash the monster away, telling it isn't taking any chances this time, and he is going to put it down first. He tells the people to get back as Clark demands to know who this monster is. The creature is confused, knowing that it's not Doomsday but can't remember who it is, smashing Superman away in frustration. John wants to help out his father as the workers tell Superman that they recognize the Beast's voice and it's Lloyd Clayton, their friend who missed work. Superman wants to move the conversation with the monster away from the city, but it grabs him, demanding to be left alone as the people around them wonder if history is really repeating itself. Superman knows that the creature wants help, but it needs to stop fighting and trust him as Lois learns more about Lloyd Clayton and how a few days ago he got sick. She learns where he lives, intending on investigating his apartment as Jimmy and Perry look after John. Superman continues to try and talk down Doomsday, but the being demands that he be left alone. John decides they should name this creature Doombreaker, as Superman notes that it feels like the creature is getting stronger the more they fight, hitting it with heat vision. Doombreaker soon fires his own heat vision at Superman, surprising the hero, who knows he's definitely evolving and developing powers to match his own. He thinks that maybe Lex Luthor is behind this creature as it continues to beat Clark down, claiming Superman will kill him. Clark refuses to have it end like it did before, especially in front of his young son, so he throws Doombreaker into the sky. Clark knows no one dies or gets hurt today, flying off after Doombreaker as Lois enters the man's apartment, finding a strange artifact on the man's kitchen counter. She realizes it's one of the original Doomsday bone spurs that Superman broke off the original in his fight with him. She theorizes that this is what changed Lloyd as an old woman from next door comes by, telling Lois that Lloyd suffered from chronic pain for years and then just a few days ago, he went quiet. Superman continues his fight, shocked that the Doombreaker is evolving midway through their fight. Lois calls out to Clark, who hears with his super hearing, learning that the creature is really a man named Lloyd Clayton, and the piece of Doomsday he kept is altering his DNA. Suddenly, Doombreaker grows wings as Clark is told by Lois that Lloyd has Doomsday's evolutionary powers, and it will make him stronger than the original. Superman knows that with more evolution, Doomsday will become unbeatable, so he attacks the creature, getting stabbed in the shoulder by a bone spur. The beast smashes him through a building, proclaiming that all Kryptonians will die. Clark knows that he needs to finish this quick, otherwise there will be nothing left of Clayton inside. The gathered people think that this is the end again for Superman as the creature rips through Superman's costume, slashing his chest open and ripping off his cape. John confronts the creature, who knows he's Kryptonian as well, screaming in his face. John, however, tells the beast he means him no harm as Superman uppercuts him, telling John that there is no reasoning with this creature now. Lois arrives with the glowing bone spur, with Superman deducing it's glowing because Doombreaker is nearby. John hopes it won't make him stronger as Superman returns to the fight with the creature and the bone spur. knowing that the evolution rate will increase now that it's there. The people cheer for Superman as he pushes the monster back, firing his heat vision into the bone spur and destroying it, which hurts Doombreaker and begins reverting him back to human form. Lloyd comes back to human form, glad that that's over, as John gives Superman his cape, knowing Superman without his cape isn't right. Superman takes off as Lois is amazed that Superman both won the day and saved Clayton. Mitch Anderson knows that this second time fight with Doomsday came with an ideal ending though, since this time, Superman lives. Years ago in Smallville, Ma and Pa can watch the news coverage of Superman's battle with Doomsday. Ma knows that this feels different to the other times though, knowing her son is hurt since he is favouring his left arm instead of his right arm. Pa wants to take her mind off the news for a while, getting out the scrapbook of all of Clark's exploits and how he's beaten tough guys before, finding one about how Metallo the cyborg used his kryptonite heart to almost kill Superman, but Clark was tougher. They also find one from when Clark left Earth after being forced to kill the General Zod of a pocket dimension. Pa knows that it was like combat trauma for Clark and he couldn't run away from it, even on another world where his refusal to kill an opponent led to a revolt against Mongol and Warworld. Pa assures Martha he always came through, but Martha wonders what cost it had on him, remembering how Clark led Earth's heroes against Brainiac. They were so proud of him being a natural leader. She knows that he keeps the worst of it to himself and he's never had to fight a creature as terrifying as Doomsday. Pa knows that the monster only seems to be interested in destruction with no care for innocence, but the people on the news are acting like it's just some Saturday night wrestling. Ma knows that he needs distracting now, showing her husband a set of articles she clipped and kept in an envelope, knowing Clark never tells them about the times he almost failed, but they have plenty of stories of his selfless acts. She shows Jonathan one about how he helped get a busload of sick people to a hospital, but that's not the whole story, as she knows a nurse told him about transplant organs and how they needed to send them to Chicago, but all flights to the city were delayed thanks to thunderstorms. Superman helped out without hesitation, and Ma reveals that she started to match Clark's stories to obituaries, finding a man named George Archimedes Smith, who died the day Clark saved the bus, and it turns out George was an organ donor, and Martha found out who he saved with his organs. Pa asks why he never knew about this, so Martha knows that she kept clipping them and there were just so many of them, but she felt like Clark wouldn't want them in the scrapbook, since there were hundreds of them. Pa knows that Clark must have devoted so much of his time to being a medical courier, and Martha is right, and Clark wouldn't want them to take away from the doctors or donors, as he just wanted to help out. Martha knows that out of death comes life, and Clark made this happen through his work. Pa knows that death is a one-way street though, but Martha doesn't think it is. The Kents find their talk didn't really distract them from the news, but they know that Clark helped turn death into life, and despite his alien DNA, Clark is the most human and humane person in the world, and Clark is fighting for all of them. Martha knows that he would never do anything less to protect his adoptive home than lay down his life. As Doomsday's rampage begins, James Harper, the Guardian, watches from the Cadmus Project, monitoring emergency police calls from across the nation about the creature. James grabs his motorcycle, uncertain on how he'll help Superman, but he knows he needs to help anyway, since he owes Superman a debt after the Men of Steel broke the mind control over him. As Guardian reaches Griffith, he witnesses a huge explosion cover the sky, barely keeping his bike upright from the shockwave. Guardian finds Superman in the blown up remains of a gas station, helping the hero up. Superman asks how Maxima is, finding that she is still alive. Guardian wants to help Superman get some medical attention, but the hero refuses since he's got to go after Doomsday, wanting to know where he went. James thinks the explosion killed the beast, since Superman and Maxima are the only ones left alive. Superman knows he's not that lucky, leaving to find Doomsday while Guardian gets Maxima to hospital. Guardian takes Maxima to a trauma center nearby, but then is contacted by Rodriguez, who tells him the Cadmus Mountain project is under attack by something. Guardian responds and finds an even more injured Superman, who knows that he needs to rest, and he will as soon as Doomsday is stopped. Guardian thinks that he got him, but Superman wants to make sure. Suddenly Doomsday attacks, kicking Superman and Guardian away, and thanks to the force of the kick, Guardian is knocked out. Double X soon wakes up James, telling him that Doomsday left Guardian and Superman for dead, and he came looking for them when James didn't radio in. Guardian finds that Superman is gone to find Doomsday, and Double X showed him a telepathic vision of the fight Superman and Doomsday are engaged right now in Metropolis in front of the Daily Planet. Guardian gets on his bike and races off, led by Double X, but James gets there too late, finding Superman and Doomsday are both dead. Guardian helps Dan Turpin try and administer some CPR, but Dan can barely get a rise out of Superman's chest. Cadmus director Paul Westfield arrives to try and take charge of the situation, but Turpin socks him in the gut for interfering. Medics continue to try and revive Superman as he is loaded into an ambulance and carted off, as the rest of them just stand in silence, not being able to find the words to express their shock. Later, James, Maggie Sawyer and Dan all go to the morgue, with James commenting how he's seen Superman take on alien armadas, but one big monster took him out. Guardian thinks that he failed Superman, but Dan knows that he did the best he could, and at least they stopped Westfield from taking Superman's body. Double X appears in the room, telling the group that time is of the essence since Paul is coming back with a full squad of Cadmus troopers to take Doomsday and Superman's bodies by force. A police officer asks Maggie if he can do that, but she knows that Paul is the type of person who would try it even if he couldn't. She tells the guards to get the MCU ready and get over to the morgue stat. She demands the room be sealed, as James says that he knows how Cadmus works, so he's staying and standing guard with them since Superman gave his life for them, and he won't let anyone else desecrate his memory. During the chaos of Superman's fight with Doomsday, John Henry Irons helps free some trapped children from a building, assuring a woman that he's okay as the concrete wall he is holding up falls onto him. The police get everyone out of the area as the people fear John Henry is dead, but John Henry isn't, saying that he has to stop Doomsday. John Henry sprints through the streets, coming across a huge car accident caused by Doomsday. Some of the locals tell him that there are ambulances on the other side of the accident and they need to get through to get to the hospital, so John suggests uncoupling the trailers so they can move it off the cars. He finds the truck hitch, however, is wrecked, but getting a pry bar from a child, he begins manually prying apart the trailer from the truck. He gets one of the kids to pull the locking pins out, freeing the trailer and the cars, allowing them to be moved out of the way so the ambulances can get through. John Henry doesn't stop, racing down the streets to continue his search for Doomsday and Superman. Soon he sees another car wreck, but this time the car had been tossed into a building by Doomsday. He takes a sledgehammer from some nearby looters, telling them of the people above. The looters know that it's Mrs. King, learning from the woman that the car in the building is blocking the stairway and they can't get out and are trapped on the fire escape. John Henry has an idea. Kicking in the door of a hardware store and grabbing some cable spool, he tosses it up to the fire escape, as the looters tell John that the people in the building are all of their family and neighborhood friends. John Henry tells them to tie the cable to the building, not the fire escape, as he begins climbing up, gathering up all of the children and people he can and taking them down to safety. The car that hit the building soon begins smoking, with John Henry getting everyone off of the building and getting them between two cars on the ground, shielding them from the explosion with his own body. The people know that he's not local, wondering what he's doing there, so John tells them that he's following the fight to help Superman. He gets directions towards the Daily Planet, racing off as they say that they'll keep an eye out for trouble. Some of the people know he's no Superman, but one boy thinks that with Superman busy, he's the closest they have. John Henry continues sprinting through the town, but arrives at the Daily Planet to find Superman is dead. John breaks down on the ground, knowing that he was too late to do anything, not even considering that Superman could die. Suddenly, a woman appears, pleading for help since everyone else is too busy to help with the people trapped in a building nearby. John Henry knows he's got time for them, but the woman thinks he's a mess and he should be in a hospital bed. John knows he should be, but he doesn't back down, telling the woman a while back Superman saved his life and he owes him and told him to make his life count, so it's time he started paying the Man of Steel back.